Good afternoon, my Cracker Tugas. I'm MBT, and here is some slop content. So if you've been following the ongoing saga that is my life, unfortunately you know that I don't have as much time these days as I would like, which presents us with the perfect opportunity for a tier list. It's a new format, we have a couple of weeks of results. I'm here to tell you, if you are willing to dip your toes into Elestrals, what is good, what is bad, what you should avoid, and what you might want to build towards. And I've done so with the decks you see below. These are just collected from the last couple of events listed on top Elestrals, and I think that's probably the best metric to see what is capital P playable. There's some other stuff on here as well that I think is underrepresented because people are sick of it, but we'll get to those when we get to those. I'm going to divide this into 4 tiers. We've got S, A, B, C, and D. Actually, let's rename that D real quick. I would like that to read Giga Ass. All right, and we are just going to go in order because I don't believe in shuffling. First and foremost, surprising no one, I think the best deck is Lochagon. I think there is a little bit of argumentation as to whether Lochagon outperforms its other peer in the top tier. I think that discussion can kind of be put to rest after the Julian win. This deck is incredibly explosive, incredibly powerful, interruptible, but though even if you interrupt it, you have to deal with the pieces on field, which will just threaten the combo the next turn. And once it gets going, not only does it absolutely dominate the board state, it also puts you in an unlosable position because you get a bunch of spirits back. This is such a strong deck, and I think the fact that people have found success with different builds of the deck between Lochagon turboing itself out and the fish build that people like Bo were playing at the Kissimmee event just shows how powerful this suite of Elestrals is. The Magnaros, the Aphoros, the Aphrodite, the Lox, of course, and the Tadpuffs. I think this deck is fine in terms of being the best deck. It's not so dominant that nothing can play against it, but I would feel uncomfortable calling anything but this the best strategy in the room. Second up is going to be Solar. So the reason I don't have this above Lochagon is I think that all of the theory crafting about this being the secret best deck in the room has so far been theory crafting. It doesn't have the results that make me feel like it can be put above Loch at present. I think there will come a day shortly where this is revealed to be a better deck than Lochagon, but at present, it is so much harder to play that I think people aren't giving it a fair chance. It also can't be denied that this card did lose stuff on the most recent ban list. This was a Rise deck, and unfortunately, without Rise, it's way harder to justify this Celestlio blowout that it was getting every single game. I think this deck is still really good, and I think it's going to take some time for people to land on lists they feel comfortable with. Even now, a couple of weeks after the release of Divine Champions Lifestream and the ban list, there's huge variation in the builds that you are seeing top on top Elestrals, but once people start circling the drain on what's good and what's not, I expect this to be a top contender, competitive with, if not better than, Lochagon. Let's go to A tier. So I'm going to put Lochagon here, but I'm using Lochagon as shorthand for the various Dionysus decks that exist. So I was not particularly excited about the card Lochagon Champion. I thought that it was a little too gimmicky of a payoff, and it necessitated playing the Drataya, which is so interruptible, especially in a format where everybody is playing Dionysus's Madness. But I can't deny Dionysus and Cyprong form the backbone of an incredibly powerful low-to-the-ground strategy that resembles First Set Earth and is really, really good. It's really good for a number of reasons, but being one of the decks that can most effectively search back row counter runes if you're playing Cyanectar or wield Dionysus's Madness, everyone's on that, puts it in a really good position. And it allows you to, even in games where you aren't able to find Dionysus, make super all-in, terribly, terribly fragile, but definitely powerful plays. I think this deck's really good. And like Solar above it, I think that people aren't convinced on what the capital D deck list for this is supposed to look like yet. I think as they become more comfortable with knowing what slots are available and what is and is not necessary to make the deck tick, it will start to resemble a more completed structure. And once that happens, I think this will be like a pillar of the format with the above strategies as well. A newcomer to the list is Morfrost, and I'm sorry this Chimera form looks awful. This is a deck that I did not have on my radar at all until the Caleb win. And watching the Caleb games, I just thought to myself, this is an incredibly powerful card. So Morfrost Chimera form allows you to pitch Morfrosts in order to draw cards, which is, of course, incredibly powerful. It gets you to your sideboarded cards, your counter runes that are necessary to stay in the game. It's really, really good. The reason I didn't feel comfortable putting this deck super high is because all of its guys are small. The Chimera forms, the Abominables, all those doodads, they cap out pretty early, and they're all 1-drop Elestrals. And previously, it was a format where Rise could just bring back a 3-cost Elestral and totally dominate you. That's now no longer a problem. And for that reason, I think this deck is very well positioned to become a power player in this metagame. Make no mistake, absent the blowout Elestrals, this was always a deck that could pop up, and I think you are seeing it pop up now at just the right time in its lifespan. I don't know if this will stay top tier or if it's just Caleb being goated out of their gourd, but I do think that it is a deck worth considering. Let's move to B. Speaking of decks I didn't have a lot of faith in, Blistrix has the numbers to make me a believer. This deck is really powerful. Obviously, getting the new Catarant and Iwoli puts it in a really great position. The huge downside to this strategy at present is that it probably lost the most from the ban list. Both the back row rune that allowed it to make a huge resource-intensive push to close out the game really, really quick, as well as the Rise from the Ashes that was functionally just its win condition anyway. I think this deck is really good, and it has results in a post-ban list environment, but I don't feel good calling it a top deck for that reason. Spinosect is probably the deck that is most improved from the beginning of the format. I think people were expecting this big Hermes pile to be a fun thing you could tinker with, but not something super competitive. In the week since, it has put up decent results. It has not cracked into top 8s and finals the way I would like to see to be comfortable calling it a top deck, but I think there is something there. Hermes is an incredibly powerful card. This is an incredibly powerful payoff for Hermes, and it slots perfectly into the deck because, of course, it's all searchable. There will be a Spinosect deck someday that is really good. And it may be playing the Dionysus stuff too. It may resemble a weird mismatch of the two of them, but I can't deny that this Elestral line is good enough to warrant consideration. Finally, a deck that I didn't think was going to have staying power after the release of Divine Champions Lifestream is the Volcaries deck. The Hephaestus, Argo, Kindleo kind of control deck lost so much. Kindleo went to 1, and with the advent of like 2 and 3 drop Elestrals, it's just so hard to stay in the game. Their power plays are so resource intensive unless you have exactly Hephaestus on field, and now everyone is ready to destroy Divine Runes, courtesy of Aphrodite and Apollo's presence in the metagame, but nevertheless, it persisted. There are still tops for this deck in the modern format. I can't deny that it gets to play a little more back row than everyone else, which is a huge, huge benefit, especially in a post-Chariot Ride environment. And it also does have cheap removal in a way that no other deck does, even in a world where Cyprong is an option you can pick. Let's go to C here, and I'm so sorry I have to do this, but Brontiglow Supercharged is going to lead off C. Man, I wanted this deck to be a little bit better. So the problem is, this is a very theoretically well-positioned deck. In a world without Chariot Ride, you have access to rune removal in a way that nobody else does. You have the capacity to contest opponents' cards before you go for a big push, and your big push is really big. Not only do you get the Supercharged, you also get to recoup a lot of your losses courtesy of Supercell. That's all theory. In practice, there are a bunch of really clunky things that kind of frustrate me about this deck. The first, of course, is that Funglow is a really bad Elestral. It has to resolve, and it doesn't always resolve. The second is it works really unintuitively with the Thunderstorm cards. What you want to do is Funglow, Thunderstorm your opponent's last back row, and then get out the Supercharged, but so doing puts you at a huge disadvantage to Gorgon's Gaze, so you have to preemptively Thunderstorm, then cast Funglow, then cast like a Supercell, which gets you the card, which costs you a lot of cards and a lot of spirits, even if you are recouping some off of the Supercell. And finally, it really just does the one thing, right? Like, there's a lot of strategies on this list that just do not care about playing the back row game. Lochagon is totally fine just never committing anything to the rune row and instead just beating you over and over again with big guys. I wish this deck was better, but I just don't think it is. And in a world where so many people can access so many pieces of removal, your only game plan being Brontiglow Supercharged is rough. You can go in on like Werepup as Dimax has, but the downside to that is now you're doubling up on rune removal, and if people aren't playing rune removal, you can kind of get yourself in a bad situation. After that is Artemis. Oh man. So the hard part about this one is the Call of the Haunted is really good. None of the other deck is particularly exciting. I know I want this deck to be incredibly powerful, but I just don't think it is. New Theraheart is really enticing. Being able to search Call of the Haunted is an incredibly powerful payoff, but almost every deck has a way to deal with it, and because the whole deck is so telegraphed, it's almost impossible to get to a position where you can feel like you are able to flex your own skill over your opponent. Instead, you just have to hope they misplay into onboard tricks, which doesn't happen as often as you would want. I wish this deck was better, I really do, because I think the cards are super cool, and someday we'll have that suppression control deck that we have been dreaming about for so long, but at present I don't feel that it's better than any of the above decks. And now we move into Giga ass territory. We're going to begin with Hydrake. So, caveat to this one, if you're Ari, just ignore everything I'm saying because that motherfucker can win with anything. But I really do not like the Pentair deck at present. I think the decks that are aiming to just cast a whole bunch of guys that win combat and then win the game are in a really bad position in a post-Hurricane, post-Chariot Ride, post-Rise environment. I think that there are more ways than ever to blank a combat step, courtesy of cards like Dionysus's Madness. And for that reason, I don't feel comfortable recommending this deck really to anyone. It's rough to say, but I think finally we may be in a position where Blackwing Sure the Blue Flame doesn't win the game on its own. Chronodial had a weird spat of tops recently. I am still not convinced with this deck. I get it. I know why people are playing Chronodial. It is really hard to get rid of, but I don't buy it. I think that there are too many mechanisms to interrupt this deck. There are too many things it is susceptible to. It is an incredibly fragile strategy, and while I can't deny if you play a fragile deck, it is possible to just avoid landmines for 8 rounds, I don't see it happening with this strategy. And finally, man, I hate to put this here, but I really, really do not like Bears this format. It obviously lost a little bit when it came to the ban list. It no longer has access to Chariot Ride or Hurricane, which were mechanisms by which you could check your opponents holding a Gorgon's Gaze, forcing you to go in on like a 9-spirit play and attempt to blow up the board. But it's just in a position now that there are so many decks with just as explosive turns that cost so much less and are so much more available. Trying to justify this deck in a format where Lochagon exists, for instance, is just a fool's errand. The reason that I don't want to put it at the bottom of Giga Ass, though, is because people just haven't been bringing it to events. And I think it's possible that that is just people being tired of the strategy, wanting to play with the new toys, and that Bears is still playable in some capacity, but until I see that manifest, I am unconvinced. So, if you are looking to get into Elestrals, these are the decks I would recommend. I think Lochagon is a fantastic pickup. Of course, you can get it basically just from starter decks. The Apollo deck is a huge skill cap list that rewards deck building. Lochagon is a good all-rounder for a new player. Morfrost is good if your name is exactly Caleb. And then the rest of these decks you may be able to put together from your bulk because a significant amount of their cards come from previous sets with only a couple of additions in Divine Champions Lifestream. Anyway, that's my video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see more of these, let me know in the comment section below. If you think it was helpful as someone who doesn't play a lot of Elestrals or as someone who is tuned out of the metagame, let me know. And if you'd like to see something different in the future, let me know as well. I'm always looking for new video ideas, especially now. See you for a TST.